Savannah, Georgia. The sun filtered through the lace curtains, draping shadows like spider silk across the hardwood floor. Tianna Robinson sat in her parlor, her back straight despite the years, her fingers moving across ivory keys with the grace of old memory. The piano hummed softly under her touch, not for an audience, but for the quiet. For herself. Outside, cicadas sang their endless lullaby, and the scent of magnolias drifted in through the window screens. The house was too still. It had been that way for a long time, 10 years, a whole decade since Harold passed. She wore his old cardigan most days, not out of grief, but out of habit, like muscle memory, like the way she brewed 2 cups of tea every morning, even though only one ever got touched. Children came and went. Her students, bright-eyed and impatient, fingers fumbling on keys, their laughter bouncing off her walls like sunlight. They brought noise, sweet noise. But when the lessons ended and the last child waved goodbye, the house exhaled silence again. She didn't mind it. Not really. Silence had become a familiar sort of company. Until the nights. At night, she played. Not for money. Not for anyone. Just so she wouldn't forget the sound of her own soul. Seoul, South Korea. Beom-seok trimmed the edge of his balcony garden, soft with the scent of perilla leaves and drying lavender. The morning air was crisp, and the sun hovered politely behind a thin curtain of clouds. A sparrow landed on the edge of the railing, hopping closer as if to inspect his work. He offered it a polite nod. "You came earlier than usual," he murmured in Korean. The bird chirped once, then flew off. Beom-seok allowed himself a small smile before stepping back inside. His apartment was simple, quiet, filled with books and paper. No TV, no clutter. Only the company of poets. Neruda, Lee Hae-in, Yeats. They sat on his shelves like patient companions. On the table lay a half-finished letter, one of many. This one was addressed to no one in particular. I wonder sometimes what it means to feel again, truly feel. Not the echoes of past griefs, but something alive, something unruly, something dangerous and warm. He set the pen down and stared out the window. He hadn't written anyone in years, not since Eunji left, not since he decided that certain kinds of love weren't worth reopening. And yet, something tugged at him lately, a soft disquiet, like the wind before a storm. An unexpected invitation. It came to both of them in cream-colored envelopes. For Tianna, it arrived tucked beneath a stack of junk mail and catalogs. She almost missed it. She opened it with one hand while stirring a pot of gumbo with the other. Her eyes skimmed the words, then stopped. The Global Arts and Cultural Exchange invites you to Jeju Island, South Korea, for a month-long senior residency retreat focused on music, poetry, and shared cultural experiences. She raised an eyebrow. "Now who in the world thought to send this to me?" she muttered, rereading the sender's name. She read the invitation twice more before setting it down beside the stove. She didn't say yes, not yet, but she didn't throw it away either. Across the world, Beom-seok's invitation arrived neatly pressed between a monthly delivery of books. He thought it was a publishing notice at first, until he saw the logo, a graceful brushstroke, half English, half Hangul. "Come share your stories, your culture, your heart." He sat with it for a long time, sipping tea that had gone cold. Tianna stood in the Savannah airport terminal with her best travel scarf tied around her curls and her suitcase, older than some of her students, wobbling beside her. She hated flying. Lord have mercy, she hated it. But she told herself this wasn't a vacation. It was an escape, a soft dare to her own spirit. Go see what else is out there. Thousands of miles away, Beom-seok locked his apartment door, his suitcase packed with only the essentials: notebooks, tea, and a photograph of a cherry blossom tree he planted 30 years ago. He didn't like flying either, but something told him it was time to go. Neither of them knew exactly why they said yes. They just knew that silence had stretched too far, that maybe, in a place halfway between Seoul and Savannah, something was waiting, maybe even someone. The storm had rolled in quietly over Jeju Island, a soft drizzle at first, then a wind that whispered through the bamboo and bent the cherry blossoms in the courtyard. The air smelled of wet earth and the salt of the sea. Inside the retreat hall, a dozen retirees gathered in a circle of folding chairs and woven mats. Candles flickered. A samul nori drum sat beside an upright piano. One side of the room buzzed with soft Korean conversation. The other hummed in English and laughter. Cultures met in the middle, with music. Tianna sat with her hands folded in her lap, watching the rain slide down the windows. Her umbrella leaned beside her seat, soaked and useless. A translator stood in the center. "We invite everyone to share something," she said gently. "A short poem, a song, a memory." One by one, people offered something. When it was Beom-seok's turn, he rose slowly. His presence was quiet, but something in him commanded attention. His poem, spoken in Korean, was translated after each verse. Love, like the wind, is not always gentle. Sometimes it breaks the branch to remind the tree it is alive. Tianna closed her eyes. When it was her turn, she stood, walked to the piano, and played a soft, lingering jazz tune. One Harold used to hum while cooking. Her fingers hesitated only once, just once. After there was a pause, then light applause. Beom-seok waited until the session ended before approaching her. He bowed politely, hands folded. "Beautiful music," he said slowly in accented English. She smiled. "And your poem was lovely, Professor." He blinked. "Ah, Professor?" "Just a feeling," she said, her grin widening. "You speak like a man who reads too many books and keeps a lot of secrets." Beom-seok chuckled, a sound like gravel stirred by wind. "I do. Both." There was a pause, just long enough for something invisible to shift. "Tianna," she offered, holding out her hand. "Beom-seok," he replied, gently shaking it. "You are musician." "Used to be. Now I just remember." He nodded, thoughtful. "Memory is music, too." She laughed, a soft, throaty sound, half disbelief, half delight. "Professor, are you always this poetic, or are you trying to impress me?" Beom-seok's smile was faint but real, only when wind is near. That night, in his journal, he wrote one word beside her name. Barum, barum, wind. Because she stirs things I thought had long settled. Because she moved something in me with a laugh. Because the storm didn't end until she smiled. In the weeks that followed, their paths crossed more intentionally. Mornings became rituals. Tianna would arrive at the common veranda, her coffee sweet and dark, while Beom-seok brought green tea in a clay cup he refused to drink from unless it had cooled to the exact right temperature. They sat together without pressure, some days in silence, others in small conversation. "Why do you stir your coffee so slow?" Beom-seok asked one morning. Tianna smiled into her cup. "Because sugar deserves time to dissolve, just like grief." He said nothing, but she saw the way his fingers tightened around the cup. They shared food from both worlds. She introduced him to cornbread and peach cobbler. He introduced her to doenjang stew and pickled radish. One afternoon, she found him struggling to translate the lyrics of a Billie Holiday song. I know the words, he muttered, frowning at the page, but not the feeling. That's your problem, Tianna teased, plucking the page from him. You're trying to understand it with your brain. Jazz isn't meant to be solved, Professor. You feel it in your bones. She played the song slowly, humming under her breath, and for the first time, he closed his eyes. That line, she whispered, it's not just heartbreak, it's surrender. It's every time you stayed quiet when you should have screamed. He opened his eyes slowly, like poetry. Exactly, she said, but with the saxophone. As the retreat days passed, their walks lengthened. They talked about family, or the lack thereof. Beom-seok told her about his cherry blossom tree, the one he planted the year his wife left. She said I was married to my books, he said simply. And were you? He paused. At the time, I thought I could be both, husband and scholar, but I wasn't good at either. Tianna looked at him for a long time. At least you tried. That counts for something. She didn't offer her own story right away. It came later, as they watched the sunset together, the sky painted in tangerine and wine. Harold used to sit with me like this, she murmured. He didn't always understand my music, but he never missed a single show. He'd hum the wrong key just to make me laugh. Beom-seok looked at her. You still love him? Always will, she said, soft and unashamed. But that doesn't mean I can't feel something again, even if it's different. He didn't reply. He just reached for her hand, hesitating only a breath before brushing his fingers over hers. She didn't pull away. That evening, as they sat under the lantern-lit trees, she laughed at one of his awkward English idioms. Something about cats and rain, and the sound of her laughter filled the space between them like a melody neither of them wanted to forget. And later, alone in his room, Beom-seok wrote again, her laugh is not music. It is what comes after the silence. It is the sound that says, you're allowed to feel again. When the retreat ended, it didn't feel real. Tianna stood at the gate in Jeju Airport, her boarding pass shaking slightly in her hand. She had packed her clothes, her journals, her spices from the kitchen exchange, but not her heart. That somehow she left in a folding chair on a veranda beside a man who made tea like it was sacred. Beom-seok walked slowly through Inchin's arrival hall, his face unreadable. He was used to returning to quiet, but this time it greeted him like a punishment. They had promised to keep in touch, and they did. Emails became voice messages became video calls. Every morning for her, every night for him. Did you eat? She'd ask, her voice soft through his phone. Only if you did, he'd answer, eyes tired but smiling. Time zones danced between them, unpredictable and inconvenient. Some days, she waited 3 hours for a response. Some nights he stared at her name on the screen, unsure if she had fallen asleep or just needed space. Still, the messages came. You make this old man miss mornings, Beom. I cooked your cornbread today. It did not rise. My oven must hate America. There's a mockingbird that sings outside my window at 4 a.m. I named him Beom-seok. But reality seeped through the cracks. Her friends noticed first. Over dinner one evening, her closest friend Loretta leaned over the table, her brow furrowed. Tianna, she said gently, you're glowing, but you're also in Georgia, and he's not. He writes to me, Tianna said, stirring her glass of sweet tea. Loretta tilted her head. Baby, writing is sweet, but don't you think this could break you? Again? Tianna didn't answer. She just folded her napkin slowly, the way she folded love letters she could never throw away. Meanwhile, across the sea, Beom-seok's niece visited unexpectedly, carrying groceries and unspoken concern. I saw your phone light up, she said, unpacking kimchi onto the counter. Was that the American woman? Beom-seok nodded quietly. She's lovely, she continued. But this isn't a book, Uncle. Are you sure this is real? He set down the kettle. It is real, just not convenient. His niece softened. You always loved puzzles, but people aren't puzzles. He nodded. Slow. Number? They're poetry. Weeks passed, then months. They kept writing. Sometimes the messages were bright, photos of blooming trees, recordings of Tianna playing piano again, Beom-seok's quiet laughter in response. Sometimes they were quiet, short, tired, missing days in between. And sometimes the silence stretched a little too long. One night, Tianna sat by her window, phone in hand, eyes tired. She pressed the record button. Beom-seok, she said softly, I don't know what we're doing. I just know. It hurts more not to do it. So I'm still here, if you are too. She didn't send it right away. She waited. Then, hours later, her phone lit up. A message from him. The wind still moves me. Every time I hear your voice. The message arrived on a crisp Monday morning. Tianna had just finished tuning her old piano when the email chimed. She squinted at the screen, rereading the words as if her eyes were lying. We would be honored if you would headline the Savannah Jazz Revival this fall. Your legacy still echoes in our halls. We hope you'll return to the stage one more time. She sat back slowly, hands trembling. Lord have mercy, she whispered. They still remember me. Her first instinct was to say no. She hadn't performed publicly in over a decade. The thought of bright lights and packed chairs made her chest tighten. But something inside her flickered, like an old record spinning to life. Across the ocean, Beom-seok was sitting with his editor in a quiet tea house in Bukchon. The woman slid a folder across the table, her eyes alight with quiet excitement. Your collection is beautiful, she said. There's something timeless about it. These letters, these poems, they feel like whispers from another life. He opened the folder. His handwriting stared back at him. Pieces of his soul, scribbled over late nights and soft dawns. Most were written after he met her. Would she mind? He asked aloud. Who? He shook his head. No one. They spoke later that night, but the usual warmth had dimmed. Tianna mentioned the jazz festival gently. I don't know if I'm doing it, she said. Feels like too much. Too late. You should, Beom-seok said. It is your music. And your book? She asked. He paused. They want to publish it. Are you going to? I don't know. A silence bloomed between them. Familiar, but heavier now. Tianna looked away from the screen. What are we doing, Beom-seok? What do you mean? This, United States. Talking like we're close, but always being so far. You write about me, but you won't come see me. I play songs that remind me of you, but I'm still alone. I am trying, he said softly. I know, she whispered, but is trying enough? He didn't answer. The next morning, she didn't send a message. Neither did he. The silence stretched across the ocean like fog, thick and unrelenting. Days passed, then a week, then two. Loretta came by with sweet tea and gospel records, but Tianna only stared at the piano, her fingers still. You mad at him? Loretta asked. I don't know, Tianna said. I think I'm just tired of hoping. Beom-seok stood at the window of his apartment, the cherry blossom tree across the courtyard in full bloom. He thought of her voice, her laugh, her storm-colored scarf. His phone sat beside him, untouched. So did the signed contract. He hadn't sent the final manuscript. He hadn't sent anything. What if we're too old to change? He had written once, or worse. What if we change? and it's already too late. He closed his journal. For the first time in weeks, he didn't make tea. The ticket sat on her kitchen table like a dare. Tianna stood by the window, suitcase open on the couch behind her, and pressed her fingers to her lips. Her heart had been loud for days, louder than her friends, louder than the doubts. You can't just fly across the world for a man who hasn't called, Loretta warned. You'll break your own heart, Tianna. Again. Tianna smiled sadly. Maybe. But at least this time, I'll know I tried. Beom-seok moved with quiet purpose, folding his clothes one last time and checking the address written in his careful script. Savannah, Georgia. His niece had looked at him like he'd lost his mind. Uncle, you're flying to America without telling her first? She will know, he said simply. She will feel it. He left his apartment before sunrise, carrying only a bag and a photo of Tianna folded in the cover of his journal. Neither of them knew they were crossing oceans at the same time. Tianna landed in Seoul on a rainy evening. She stepped out of Incheon Airport, scanning faces, unsure of what she expected. The city felt like a soft thunder, unfamiliar but steady. Her phone buzzed. A message from Loretta. He's not in Seoul, baby. I just saw him. He's here, in Savannah. Tianna stared at the screen. Her lips parted in disbelief. Beom-seok stood in front of Tianna's house, suitcase at his side. The wind rustled the trees, and the scent of gardenias filled the air. He knocked once, then again. No answer. A neighbor called out from their porch. She's not home, honey. Said she had to go find someone. Beom-seok exhaled slowly, closing his eyes. He looked up at the sky, unsure whether to laugh or curse the stars. It took 2 more days. 2 frantic phone calls. 1 overnight flight. And a single, breathless moment at a small airport in Chicago, where fate finally folded the distance between them. Tianna stepped through the arrival gate, heart racing, and there he was. He wasn't looking at his phone. He wasn't moving. He was waiting. And when their eyes met, neither of them said a word. She walked to him. He opened his arms, and she folded into him like the silence had never existed. No grand speeches, no confessions, just the quiet language of hearts too tired to run anymore. She rested her head on his shoulder. He kissed her forehead. And for the first time in a long time, they were home. Spring in Savannah was made for second chances. On his second visit, Beom-seok arrived on a Sunday morning, stepping into Tianna's world with a suitcase in one hand and a promise in the other. The city welcomed him with sunshine and birdsong, Spanish moss hanging like whispers from the oaks. Tianna met him on the porch with fresh coffee and a plate of warm biscuits. He blinked at the food suspiciously. "This is not tea," he muttered. She laughed. "You're in the South now, baby. We baptize everything in butter." He sat beside her on the porch swing, their knees touching. "Then I must learn. Teach me." And she did. He fumbled through gumbo and cornbread. She tried his rice porridge and miso soup. They built a language through flavor, their kitchen full of steam, music, and the occasional curse when he burned the okra. "You are cruel to vegetables," Tianna teased one afternoon. "Vegetables are cruel to me," he retorted, waving a scorched pot like a flag of surrender. Their days found a rhythm. Mornings began with the music, soft jazz drifting from the speakers while Tianna wrote at the kitchen table. Her fingers, once frozen by grief, danced again across the pages. Not stories about Harold, not about what she lost, but about now, about what she'd found. Beom-seok wrote beside her, poems in Korean and English, love letters with no envelopes, a book slowly taking shape, not from longing, but from presence. In the evenings, they walked, sometimes to the park, sometimes to nowhere at all. They held hands like it was the first time, every time. They went to jazz nights downtown, where Tianna was always greeted like royalty. Beom-seok would sit with a proud smile, watching her sway to rhythms she had once buried. "You dance when you sit," he said once. "Then you must be watching with your heart," she replied. He kissed her hand. Always. Their home became a symphony. Not loud, not grand, but full. The clink of teacups, the scribble of pen on paper, laughter echoing down the hallway, quiet murmurs as the sun slipped below the horizon. One night, Tianna sat at the piano and played a new melody, something she hadn't composed in years. Beom-seok listened, eyes closed. When she finished, she turned to him, voice low and thoughtful. "I thought my song ended years ago." He smiled, walking to her, gently placing his hand over hers on the keys. "You were just waiting," he said, "for your second verse." She looked up at him, eyes glassy, full of something soft and certain. "And you?" she asked. He leaned down, kissed her forehead. "I was waiting for someone to sing it with." The sun dipped low over Savannah, pouring honey gold light through the open windows of a house that had learned the sound of love. Tianna sat at the piano, her fingers trailing through an old melody, one she had written for no one, and later, for him. Her hair was silver now, wrapped in a soft scarf the color of twilight. Her back remained straight, her playing still precise, but gentler now, wiser. Beom-seok sat nearby in his favorite chair, a thick novel resting in his lap. Though his eyes were not on the page, they were on her. A knock came at the door, followed by the creak of young footsteps. It was Malik, the teenage grandson of Loretta, tall and curious, his voice just starting to settle. "Miss Tianna," he asked, peeking into the room, "can I ask something?" She stopped playing and turned, smiling. "You just did." He grinned shyly. "No, I mean, how did you two meet?" Beom-seok looked up, amused, closing his book with a soft thud. Tianna didn't answer right away. Her eyes met her husband's. Yes, husband now, after all this time. Something passed between them, a promise kept. She reached for his hand without looking and intertwined her fingers with his. Then she turned back to Malik, her voice as smooth and sweet as it had ever been. "After the rain," she said simply, "we met." Beom-seok nodded, adding with the whisper of a smile, "and we never let go." The piano began again, and the house, wrapped in twilight and memory, swayed with the music of a love that had taken its time, but arrived exactly when it was meant to. The end.